All right, welcome back to Agency Journey. I'm your host, Gray McKenzie from ZenPilot. And this week I've got the pleasure of bringing on Jesse Resnick, who's the founder and CEO of EI Digital. Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Gray. Appreciate it.
I'm super excited to dig in. You and I met, we were talking project management tools a couple of weeks ago, and you got a super cool story of building like a really impressive agency. So maybe by way of context here, let's give people a snapshot of the agency first. And then I want to dig into kind of your story of how we got here and some of the key pieces along the journey.
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed our chat. It was a little like impromptu and then led to a longer discussion. And you were really clicked in the whole way. So I really enjoyed that. So a quick background on the agency. We've been around now for 13, coming on 14 years. EI Digital is a full service creative digital agency, and we've really built the agency organically over those 13 years. Started literally out of my apartment with my business partner Walter, and grew it from there. I think once we got to 4 employees, we said, okay, we got to move out of my apartment into a real office. Got our first office. Signed a 1-year lease. From there, signed a 2-year lease. And by the second half of that 2-year lease, we had fully outgrown that office, had to find subtenants, move into a bigger office. And it's kind of been a growth journey, like that.
Yeah. Were you guys full service from the start?
So the foundation of kind of, I would say, our philosophy has always been strategy and great user experience, right? And we use user experience pretty broadly to mean, I come from working, before starting this, I was a creative director at LBI, which became a Digitas LBI. And, the thing that always frustrated me the most was that I'd be in strategic conversations, I'd be leading business development or idea creation for something. But really the model often at a bigger agency is then the work gets passed down the chain to be executed. And I really care about the ideas, and I care equally about the execution. So for us, it was pulling everything through the line. So the question, were we full service from the beginning? The vision was always full service, and we would approach that based on the work that we had, at the time or the needs. But, it was primarily creative and technology, a lot of web and brand from the beginning. And then we added in our digital marketing team. We added in, CRM and other components to kind of round out the full service nature. But creative and technology were always at the center.
Right. That makes sense. What, hearing this story of coming from an agency, and like you fit into one of the 3 main archetypes of agency owners, like either you're ex-agency and we're like, no, there's a better way I can do this differently.
Yeah.
Or you're an accidental agency owner, just, typically creative who, did enough freelance stuff and there was enough demand, they decided to hang up their shingle. Or you're like the anti-agency, you come from running marketing or something in-house, and you're like, no, all these agencies suck. I can do this a better way. What were the things you were most unprepared for in making the jump from being at a much larger agency to you and Walter hanging up your shingle?
Well, it's interesting. So if I go through, a super accelerated version of the last 25 years of my life, I sort of fit in between maybe 2 of those archetypes, right? Because I first started, I was obsessed when I was, 19, 20, 21, just obsessed with the early interactive web. So from 2000 to 2002, all I did all day long was spend time building Flash websites, building Flash games, because everything you could do was in Flash, right? And I have a lot of family in film and television, and always had a kind of creative bent to my work, and I've always had an entrepreneurial streak. So I started a Flash studio in about 2001, 2002, and it was super organic. And I actually worked at the Apple Store, right when they opened Apple Retail. And I would just get clients because I ended up teaching in the theater in Apple Soho. And I said, hey, I want to teach a class on web design. And I basically teach a 4-part series on web design. People would come to that class and I'd be like, can you just make my website for me instead of me doing it? And I would just get clients that way, and referrals and things like that. And my biggest client through a referral ended up being a startup agency called Special Ops Media. And I didn't know it at the time, but I did one freelance project with them. I did two. I did about 20. And it turns out I was doing about 90% of all of their creative and technology work. And I sat down with the CEO and he said, why don't you just come in and run our creative and technology department? And I said, why don't I? So we essentially merged what was Resnick Media into Special Ops Media. And I was the first employee of the creative department there. And there was me and freelancers. That grew to 25 people. Overall company is 75. I ran a satellite office out of Dumbo. And that was a 7-year journey. And that agency grew really fast. We did a lot of work in film and television with Spirits brands. We worked with Dell. And they sold the agency, started their earnout in 2008. That closed in 2010. And in 2010, they merged. LBI had purchased it, which had no US footprint at the time. They bought Special Ops Media, Icon Nicholson, which was an iconic original digital agency out of New York, and an agency called Syrup. They mashed this all together and became LBI US. And through that journey, I really never had an aspiration to be a global big agency guy. And there was a short honeymoon period, but I always knew I wanted to go back to being entrepreneurial and kind of having a smaller studio. I've always believed small groups of highly skilled, highly motivated, well-communicating people can just achieve more than you can at a large organization. And you have folks like Google and others who do a great job creating small teams inside of large organizations, but that was always my ambition. And when they merged everybody together, I was actually laid off as part of that merger, which was great for me. And one of the brilliant things is actually I made it within 2 days of the Obama stimulus bill getting the extension to the original Obama stimulus. So thanks, Obama,
Yep.
I got my healthcare paid for 18 months. So that was my booster pack to basically starting this agency. And when I got laid off, I knew immediately I was going to do something. I knew I didn't want to do it alone. And work came across my desk, took on 1 and 2, 3 projects, and then eventually met my business partner. We said, hey, do you want to go for it? And the rest is kind of history.
Wow. That is cool. So yeah, you really were like the accidental agency, like kind of moving into it.
Yeah, it was a bit of both.
Through the through kind of the exit stage and then into
and that exposure to the earnout and the deal structure of kind of growing an agency was incredibly educational for me and incredibly valuable in my career journey, because I effectively ran a P&L at Special Ops Media and got to be part of seeing the inner workings of the earnout, of the structure. I wasn't at the deal table, but I was part of the execution of that.
Right. That's amazing. What you just said about kind of small teams over big teams is like a preference for delivering great work.
Yeah.
How does that create a cap on how big you want EI Digital to be? Or is that just shaped how you structure the team and break up work?
Yeah, I would say the latter. It shaped how I like to approach work. And we run, our account teams are essentially set up as, little working groups or pods. We actually color code them. So there's the green team, the blue team, et cetera. And, so our account teams are those small working groups. And then we have departments of resources, whether it's creative, technology folks, or digital marketing, kind of deep T skill sets. And those account teams work closely with those. And we are very, we look at our client work and we mirror what the client needs versus mirroring our own structure.
Right.
So it scales pretty well, actually, because we keep that small structure. And it just requires a kind of consistency to be kept amongst those smaller groups.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned something about kind of the intersection of, I want to say you said brand and performance marketing.
Yeah.
Tell me more about
This
that.
is something I'm big. So the way if I look at the marketing landscape right now, if you were to kind of draw just two macro circles, you would look at it through brand and a performance lens, right? And generally, marketers are looking at their marketing spend, looking at their P&L, looking at their activities through one of those two lenses, and they're very different, right? Brand is all about the emotional connection. It's a long-term strategy. And performance is all about conversion now, selling more. And both are really valuable, right? And in a lot of ways, I would think of the brand side more in advertising, classic sense, and the performance side more in a marketing, digital marketing sense, right? Again, depending on who you're talking to, terms can mean different things. These two things are meeting in the middle, as far as I'm concerned, because the shifts in privacy, shifts in kind of cookies, you're seeing brand marketers understand that they can start to bring more data into their brand marketing to understand performance of brand. And I think the performance people are starting to understand, well, short-term performance-based work can only take you so far. And there's I think it was New York Times or Wall Street Journal article on Airbnb from a couple of years ago, where Airbnb was like, we don't do performance, we're 100% brand, right? And that kind of sent some shockwaves through my world of people going, yeah, wait, is it performance or is it brand? And I thought that was actually an awesome discussion that really kicked off, because it's not one or the other, and it's definitely contextual on the specific client. But that intersection of brand and performance that exists now is, for me, the future of brand marketing.
Can you help bring this to life? Like, you're working with a client, you've worked with a lot of spirits companies. I mean, you've got a wide array of kind of backgrounds. But in my mind, like the first thing that pops to mind is a lot of this brand stuff is kind of the backbone and creates a lot of the assets that we can use in our performance marketing campaigns. But
Yep.
what does this look like, or like how does this play out in a client engagement?
So I think it's a mixture. If you look at it through a classical paid lens, right, you're targeting either kind of for views and large scale distribution and awareness, or you're targeting for performance, right, or conversion. I think these two things are blending in every think about it super broadly. Every touch point that a brand has, whether that's at POS, in an advertising context, through an experiential lens, through your social channels, through your own website, every one of those is a deeper chance to engage with that consumer. And the more you're working to collect responsible first party data in email and a sign up, and then zero party data where you're learning more and more about that consumer, you're understanding, if you're doing your job well as a brand marketer, you have this beautiful, emotional, engaging commercial, some percentage of people should want to go deeper. And if they're not, you're doing something wrong, right? And so that's where the performance side of that brand comes in. And when you're looking at metrics, it's what I'd say, reverse the funnel, right? Don't look at how many clicks did I get? What were my total impressions? What were my things? Put those as your last metrics that you look at. In fact, how many, there's only 3 points of conversion. You're either getting an actual conversion through a sale, you're getting a point of data from the consumer, or you're getting an engagement, right? And I prioritize them in that order. So if you're a brand marketer, maybe you're distributed through, distribution channels. You don't actually have a point of sale like a spirits brand often doesn't, but we could talk about how in a modern context they can. We work with Pepsi and Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew doesn't although we have sold direct to consumer a few times, most of the distributions through supermarket, etc. But you can collect data. So we run, for example, Do Nation HQ, which is their loyalty program and fan community. And some percentage of people from everything we do are going to end up signing up for that and remain engaged with us. Or they're going to click through from really crazy brand spot, and they're going to click through. Again, where brand marketers fail at this, how many times have you watched a video through an ad, going, oh, that's cool, let me click on it. You land on a landing page, and what do you see on the landing page? The exact same video you just watched.
Right.
It's like a complete disconnect from what the actual consumer experience is. So again, this blending of brand and performance is really taking the best of the data side of performance marketing and blending it with the best of the emotional side of brand marketing.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Can we talk a little bit about some of the clients that you've worked with and the types of clients? Like what does an ideal client look like, and kind of how have you found your niche, or kind of what that best fit client looks like?
Sure. I mean, we have worked with, from Allergan, the big medical aesthetics, the makers of Botox, Juvederm, et cetera. Proximo Spirits, which is Jose Cuervo, Bushmills Whiskey, Stranahan's Distillery, a bunch of other brands. PepsiCo is a client of ours. And I think where we've really found success is, we love to work with, larger to mid-size brands, but we've worked with startups as well, all the way from, we worked with a SPAC last year on a brand project. We've worked with all sorts of ad tech startups when that market was really hot. And, for us, we've always said, we want to be working with clients where we can make a meaningful impact. And we're not out there just looking for the sexiest clients, although it's always fun to have a little, fun or sexiness to your client. Spirits certainly does that. Mountain Dew's been really fun, but also, we've done financial services, and we worked, last year we did a big branding and digital project for a company who was trying to pivot into carbon credits. And they work in the metals space, and I won't get into all the specifics. Heavy B2B, kind of financially oriented company, absolutely fascinating to work on. And, so we really run the gamut in terms of the verticals that we work in. But I would say our secret sauce would be our ability to really connect strategy and goals through all consumer touch points, or through all B2B touch points, right? So one other example or manifestation of that is when we worked with Allergan, we helped them with the full relaunch of their loyalty program. Now, Allergan is a house of brands, not a branded house. Nobody knows, consumer side what Allergan is. And their customer is doctors, HCPs, right? And they wanted to have a consumer-facing program. It used to be called Brilliant Distinctions, and it looked not great, slightly outdated. And we worked with them, and we had to create the connective tissue between all of the disparate Allergan brands, which span Skin Medica on one side, which is a, like SkinCeutical, sort of, pharmacy grade skincare, all the way to Botox, which is a black box, regulated drug that has to be administered from a doctor. And we had to create connective tissue between all of these things. And what we did, went through a whole branding, naming process, looked at all the touch points and the journey. The unlock ended up being, it's always the simplest thing, right? We named it Alley with a accent over the E, which was the first 4 letters of Allergan. And so we literally took the first 4 letters of Allergan and named their program, but we gave it a personality, and we let each brand shine through that program and kind of become its own. And that's a platform that exists. And lives on through this day. So I think it's that secret sauce exists in our ability to kind of create that connective tissue through multiple channels, multiple types of brands, et cetera. The other thing I'll say is we've tended to, and I don't know why this is, but have a lot of success in regulated or complex markets, right? Whether that's spirits, pharma or financial services. Even I put the ad tech in there because it's very complex algorithms that we're needing to explain. We've always enjoyed kind of more complex environments.
Yeah. I've got a couple operations questions jotted down. And the first one is kind of teed right off of kind of a wide variety. You've got some areas where you've spent a lot of time working with clients, but you've got a pretty diverse set of industries and business types represented there. So the first operational question is, how are you assigning new clients to specific pods? Sometimes that's by specialization, sometimes just capacity, but what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So it's changed over the years and we've approached it differently at different times. Right now, we have basically one pod that is always set up to intake new business. And so they're at, let's say, 60% capacity as a unit. And so what's always been difficult is if you run everybody at 100% or 90% capacity, you're basically just needing to hire into every piece of new work you get, which when you're very small works fine. And we would stay very close to that business. But right now what we do is we keep one pod effectively lower in capacity. They partner with our business development team and myself in winning new business. And then it creates a really smooth onboarding for that client. There are instances, like you say, if we're working with a super specialized client, let's say it's a pharma side client or medical aesthetics, something like that, we will sometimes hire in a specialist to work on that, to be attached to that work. But most of the time, it goes into the pod that has intentional capacity.
Right. I guess I need approach. Obviously, the challenge with that for most teams is, what is the handoff then from the onboarding pod to someone else? But if you've got that intentionally, that deals with a lot of the capacity issues and the challenges that a lot of teams run into. How do you streamline that onboard, or the transition of like kind of post onboarding to now you're getting handed off?
Yeah, it's always a journey. I mean, myself and my business partner, Walter, still play a pretty big role. Often, if we're onboarding a bigger client, we often play that continuity piece still. And it's something that I really enjoy. Like I said at the beginning, kind of making sure things go from idea through execution to me is vital, right? A great idea poorly executed is nothing or could even be harmful. And even a medium idea, really well executed, has value, right? It is all about the execution. And in the boardroom setting, of marketers and advertisers and brand, that can get lost, right? Sometimes you're working to the CMO, you're working to the boss, you're working to not to the consumer. And so we're always trying to orient people to, those things matter tremendously. Those are the decision makers. But to really be effective, we need to be making an impact with the end consumer, whoever that is. It's a B2B context, it's still a person. If it's a consumer context, it's that individual, and trying to bring it as one-to-one as possible.
Yeah. One question, I've got a handful of questions that I jotted down from some folks who asked. So one is acquisition, but wanting to know on both sides. So where do most clients, or where does most of the deal flow come from? And then on the flip side, kind of the second part of this question is, how do you approach hiring and recruiting and retaining talent? Which is kind of two totally separate questions.
New client acquisition is the $1 million question for everybody, right? And I will say, through my career and certainly through running this agency, I've been very fortunate, I would say, and I'll take a little credit to my partner, credit to the whole team who works here. We've done a really good job of retaining clients through the years, really trying to focus on building deep relationship, executing at a high level, listening. And we've been very fortunate to grow organically like that. So client leaves one place, goes to another, brings us along. Um, and, I have a decent network, and deals have organically rolled across my desk, right? And I will say this year, right, through COVID, did very well. Actually, clients lean more into us, right? We have a digital bent to our work. So made us the hot game in town. Um, I would say 2023 has been the quietest deal flow year I've experienced in my career, 25 years. And the comfort I find in that is that every agency owner I know, from big agencies through small, I know agencies who have shuttered their doors. I know agencies who have been cut into a fourth. I literally yesterday got an email, an agency, somebody I actually used to work with closely, probably 30, 40 person shop. They've decided they're closing up shop, right? And it's rough out there, man. And I think misery loves company. And it's certainly, there's some solace. And wow, we're not the only ones going through that. And we're very fortunate that a lot, we have a strong base of clients. And, but yeah, so that is the $1 million question, right? Where do new deals come
Right.
from? In my experience, it's always been relationship
Yeah.
first, right? It's been networking, relationship. We've tried to do partnerships. We've tried to, I had a call with brand innovators earlier in this week. Um, I'm a bit of an old school business guy, and really, I don't like to spend over my skis, right?
Sure.
And so spending in advance of a deal has always been something I've been pretty skeptical of. And then I would say, my new thing is trying to do more things like this and get on and get out there and network and be a little bit more visible in the market. I can tend to be a bit of a heads down executor, and trying to flex a little bit more and get out there a little bit more.
Right. Right. That's awesome. I think certainly referrals are always going to be the best channel. And then how kind of you augment that is a question for a lot of people. But
Yeah,
to
100%.
your point, if most of your growth can come from existing clients in a year like this, that's a huge place to be in.
Totally agree. I mean, and most of it it's not just existing clients, but it's also a network, right?
Yeah.
Staying in touch with people, really that relationship side. I'd a former client of mine is now CMO over at Logitech, and we haven't actually worked together on the critical path of a project in a number of years, but we still have lunch 1 or 2 times a year and genuinely enjoy each other's company and appreciate each other and talk about our families and relate to each other. And I think the genuine nature of that really makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
We're not just staying in touch because I want to be sent the next project or I'm looking for a specific handout.
How about on the recruiting side?
Yeah, recruiting. I mean, that's been a journey too, culturally, right? I mean, one of the things I think I've been very successful in my career is identifying talent. And I love working with smart people, often earlier in their career, capable people who, I have had a good eye for understanding, wow, you have some skills in this area, and sometimes understanding people's skill sets better than they do and pushing them to be better, right? So many people I've nurtured and worked with through the years have gone on to have awesome careers and are now running departments or started their own agencies, et cetera. So that identification of talent, I will say, in a remote world and through the what was it, the Great Resignation, right, as it was coined. I'd never seen a hiring environment like that either in my career, right? Where entry level employees are asking for huge salaries and everybody. And we've seen a lot of that now cool off. We've seen it kind of settle down. I wouldn't say it's back to where it historically has been, but the employer to employee relationship isn't as skewed as it once was, kind of at the peak of everybody was just like, everybody's hiring, right?
Right.
It's almost as if there was a massive stimulus and just too much cash in the system. Almost
Strange, right?
strange. Yeah, it's weird.
That's funny. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Another one, somebody asked, what are the 3 to 5 main metrics you look at in your business every week?
It's amazing to me how many business agency owners I meet who run their books on a cash basis. And I've helped many understand accrual accounting and shift their whole mindset. Um, but, macro accrual accounting is invaluable if you're trying to run a strong P&L and really understand. And for anybody, who hopefully you understand what that means. If you don't, accrual accounting is taking in the dollars as you earn them, not as they're deposited into your account, right? So I'm hired to do a brand strategy. I'm hired for a website. I'm on a retainer. Every month I get that retainer, or each bit of work I complete, I recognize my revenue against when I'm doing the work versus when the check is deposited. And matching that up with we're mostly based on W-2 full-time employees. We don't use a huge amount of freelancers, which is different than probably a lot of shops our size. But we're matching up utilization against those numbers. And we essentially run each pod as a mini P&L, and then we roll everything up. And I actually have my account directors do their own revenue allocations, right? So they're in charge of, great, I worked with Bushmills, I worked with Allergan, I did this amount of work, this is the amount of revenue I'm recognizing. And I've always played a game with myself, and this is sort of how I'm built. Even when it was just me and Walter, I think about departments and I think about reporting to a board, right? So I'm the founder and CEO here. I don't have a board. I still act as if I do. So I'm always telling financial stories. I'm always prepared to explain the numbers. I'm trying to balance my months and my quarters. And if they don't match, it bugs the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I work to kind of balance that story. So again, I'm sort of long-winded answer, but the metrics I look at are macro metrics of kind of, month over month, P&L metrics, right? Gross revenue, net revenue, super important to distinguish between the two.
Yep.
Our operating stays pretty flat. Our salaries stay pretty flat. And then looking, we measure everything against EBITDA, right? So everything is what is the EBITDA of it at the end of the day. I would turn down $1 million project unless there was some strategic reason to take it. But I'll turn down $1 million project that costs us $1 million to do any day of the week.
For sure.
Right. Not everybody would do that. Right. And sometimes there is an advantage to taking that on. But I'm a pretty old school business guy looking to, run a sustainable and sound business. And, we play our numbers pretty conservative. And that comes out of my pocket, right? We also pay ourselves last, always.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is your number one tip for agency operators?
Number one tip. Yeah. The accrual thing would be a big one. I would say maybe a number one tip would be to disarticulate your identity from the work. And that is a hard one for a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people in general, but I think is really, really important to do. And if I can give a second one, especially if you're earlier in your professional career, would be to not pull out as much money as you can, but also to make sure you're earning money, right? I've seen people go one of two ways. You kind of have the person who's like, oh shit, I made some money. Like, I'm going to Vegas, right? I literally know that guy. And on the other side, I've seen people just work their faces off and not earn money and make sure you know why you're doing it. It's not all about the money, and it shouldn't be. But if you're running a for-profit enterprise, make sure you're getting paid along the way.
I love that. Both of those are really good. Yeah, worked 2 years ago with a agency did 3.1 million in top line revenue. So 40-person firm, which is too many people for the revenue, but
Yeah.
the EBITDA on it, or the net margin, was 1.5%. And we're looking at it, I was like, this can't be right.
Yeah,
so what are we
exactly.
doing if you're not running
I mean, I've seen that story. Moreover, I mean, another good lesson is, pay your taxes.
Also true.
I know at least 3 agencies I can think of who, didn't understand some of those fundamentals. And that's the problem, right? You gave those 3 tracks at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
If you're that accidental agency owner and you're not an entrepreneur, maybe you're more of the artist side of it, you are passionate about the work, but you don't really love the business side, you don't like the numbers, you got to get into the numbers.
Right.
And, if you told me, again, I've been on, I was pretty early in my career when I got into this stuff, but if you told me before I was deep in my career that like I was a spreadsheet guy or that I loved numbers, I wouldn't. But there's so much creativity and there's so much to really get excited about, frankly, in understanding numbers and stories behind numbers. And I love financial stories. I just do.
Yeah.
And that's, from listening to NPR, kind of financial stories on that side. Ray Dalio's Principles is a book that I love. We actually just went through the exercise of writing our own agency principles, which I found hugely rewarding. But yeah, pay your taxes.
That's awesome. Bunch more I could ask you, Jesse. This has been awesome, though. I appreciate you coming on and being willing to share on Agency Journey today. We'll make sure we link up your LinkedIn, the website. We'll get all that stuff on the in the show notes for this. Anything else or anywhere else you'd want to point people?
No, if anybody's listening to this and anything I've said has resonated with you, you find it valuable, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll try to get back to anybody who reaches out.
That's awesome. Jesse, thanks for coming on today. This has been awesome.
Yeah, great. Really enjoyed it, man. Have a great day.